Here on the Echo Ratings Eventing podcast, we have teamed up with our great friends at Bedmax, along with our very own Spike the Vet, to give you guys, our lovely listeners, some tip-top tips on how to keep your horses happy and healthy in a stable environment. So, Spike, what have you got for us to get us started?
Well, here we are. Tip-top tips. And it's so important to reduce our risk of respiratory disease. Using a bedding with the lowest possible dust rating, such as Bedmax, is the absolute cornerstone to ensure a happy and healthy respiratory environment for a horse. Along with that, a really well-ventilated, stable environment so that we can maximize that clean air for the horse in the area where it's breathing as well. So in the corners, and it is criminal how many stables I go to, and these would be in very professional yards where we still see cobwebs, dust, all kinds of things in those corners around water drinkers, around feeding bowls, feeding troughs, hay bars, all these sort of things. And it's so important that we make sure that that's a better environment for them.
So not only a good quality bedding, but also you've got to whip out your feather duster or your Henry Hoover and make sure you get in all the nooks and crannies.
Or you got to get your feather duster out. Otherwise, I'll get my white gloves and I'll be checking out for how much dust there is. But seriously, it's very important. And it is unbelievable how often it's overlooked.
There you go, listeners. A tip-top tip for you from our very own Spike the Vet, courtesy of our lovely friends at Bedmax.
Thank you, Nicole, and look forward to coming back with some more tip-top tips.
Oh God, it's so exciting.
It is a happy hill bob day.
Some of the most reliable grassroots horses.
That was Arilo coming into the competition.
Eventing manager is back.
Best show that we have, Alphabetti Spaghetti.
Looking forward to seeing quality horses.
I mean, you're a bit of an eventing geek just like us.
Welcome to the Echo Ratings Eventing podcast, and listeners, a When Nicole Met show, very, very kindly supported by our lovely friends over at Bedmax. Now, today's guest is a man who has enjoyed one of the biggest successes of his career earlier on this year. He is an ice cream entrepreneur, which is a fact that I found absolutely fascinating. One of the nicest men in eventing, David Doel. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Nicole. Yeah, how are you doing?
I'm very, very good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, I'm very, very good, thank you.
Now, I feel slightly guilty because we were just chatting at the start of this show and you told me, just dropped into casual conversation, it's currently 8:10 in the evening and you've got to leave at 1:00 in the morning in under 5 hours' time to go to Marsbergen. So I appreciate your dedication to this show. Thank you.
That's right. It's a pleasure.
The life of an event rider in the height of the season, I think it should be said. Well, look, thank you very much, because we're dying to kind of uncover more of your story and hear a little bit more about your career and what's coming up over the next few months, because there is lots in store for you. So let's rewind the clock. How did young David Doel fall in love with horses?
So I'm very lucky. I live on sort of our family farm. We're dairy farmers, and my dad's a dairy farmer. And my mum has always ridden through her life. She competed to advanced eventing and sort of Grand Prix dressage. So there was a pretty good sort of easy base setup, really. And mum had ponies for me sort of fairly early on. And she was really good about it. I never sort of really felt pressured, and sort of ponies came and went a little bit. And I can never remember sort of being forced to ever ride or anything like that. And it just really took off. I was never at school. I was never going to do my A levels. Being sort of on the farm and things. I've always had a very good backup at just being able to work on the farm. And so my parents were great and supported me in deciding to take up eventing full time.
And when did that decision come that actually it was the eventing that you wanted to pursue and not the farming?
I milked cows for sort of winter for a little while anyway. After I left school, and it just got to the point where I was getting up at sort of 5:00 in the morning and milking for a couple of hours, 3-4 hours in the morning, and then trying to ride 10 horses. It just wasn't really working. So it was a fairly easy decision to chuck in milking cows and to just keep riding the horses full time.
I was going to say, so my dad was a dairy farmer. He's sadly no longer with us, but I grew up in that kind of environment. And I would say, eventing is a tough sport and a tough life, and there's a lot of hard work and, early starts, late finishes, everything else. But there is a certain relentlessness and work ethic that comes from a dairy farm that actually, going from sort of one extreme to another as such, because it is not an easy life in that respect at all, is it?
No, absolutely not. And I suppose I've just always been brought up, my dad farmed and my mum's had the horses all the way through. And so I've always just been brought up that, you just get on and you do the work basically, and you don't complain, you don't grumble about it. Work is there. It provides me a fantastic lifestyle. It might not be sort of earning me my millions and millions, but I have a very nice life doing the horses.
Get on and do the work. That, listeners, right there is a life lesson that we can all take. That is the kind of inspiration that I'm after. Okay, so let's kind of go back to the early sort of, I guess, the first championship experiences. And your first junior Europeans was with a lovely little horse called Pick and Mix. And you rode as an individual back in 2010 at Segerberg. That's okay. I was going to call it Segerberg, but Segerberg. Tell us a little bit about him, because he had a brilliant career and helped sort of a lot of young riders really sort of realise their dreams, didn't he?
Yeah, no, he was a fantastic horse. He very sadly I think actually got put down about sort of 10 days ago. So he's lived quite a good long old life. But no, that first championship in Germany, it really gave me the buzz for doing teams, and made me realise just sort of quite how much fun it is, but how much I wanted to do the teams, and not just sort of at the time juniors, young riders, but obviously have the aim of a senior team as well. And no, he was a great horse. He was never going to win a medal. He was quite smart on the flat, but he wasn't the scopiest at jumping. But yeah, we had a great time, and it was a real experience sort of traveling abroad with a whole load of other sort of 17-year-olds. It was quite good fun getting to stay away in a hotel, without your parents and sort of five other mates. Basically, it was there was a lot of things going on.
If that doesn't sort of, give you the bug for eventing, then I don't know what will. Were you always very competitive coming up? Because I know you did a lot of pony club and that kind of thing. Were you always very competitive at school sports and things like that?
Yeah, so riding wise, the sports that I really enjoy, I get very, very competitive in. And there are other ones that I just sort of, can play for a bit of pleasure. But no, riding wise, I was always very competitive. And my mum was always really good, actually. And from a really sort of like young, early age, we never talked about sort of getting nervous or anything like that. But we always talked about sort of getting the buzz. And so my mum sort of, I don't know, I suppose just trained it into me that you go to a competition for the buzz. And that buzz, I think for some people sort of equates to nerves. Whereas for me, it's sort of a bit of the only way I can really describe it is it's my buzz, really. So it's jumping that clear round, and that little bit of relief, that bit of tension. Yeah, it's quite cool.
The buzz is a really nice way to describe it, actually. Do you ever get nervous, or is it just an increased buzz level, shall we call it?
Yeah, I think probably just a bit of an increased buzz level. We try very hard to make sure that when we go to competitions, the horses are well prepared. And I think if I went to a competition feeling underprepared, then I probably would be a bit more nervous. But I think everything that we go to nowadays, we try to make sure we're as prepared as we possibly can. And so I think I just have to believe that my preparation can get me as good a result as I possibly can. So there's no need to get nervous, really.
I think that's a very, very good point to take forward. And I'm sure one that there's a few people listening on when they do get nervous, even though they're well prepared, think, God, I wish I need to channel this. I need to channel this in my life. Can I ask you about the junior young rider championship days? Because we spoke a little bit about that kind of initial debut, but actually it was a pretty successful junior young rider campaign. I think you did basically every championship for 5 years on the trot, 10, 11, 12, 13 and 14. So that was 2 junior Europeans, 3 young rider Europeans. There were a variety of different horses in there as well, 4 different horses across the 5 championships. Is there a moment that stands out for you as being a highlight? I'm going to guess, actually, having said that it's probably Vale Sabroso. Would that be fair?
Yeah, Vale Sabroso with King's Cross. So King's Cross was one that my horse that my granny owned. And we bought him off Rue Fox, who I'm slightly related to. And King's Cross, he was a funny old thing, but no, it was great. And to come away with 2 medals, a gold medal for the team, and a bronze medal myself, it was a fantastic time. And I have a real love for sort of the competitions out in Portugal anyway now. I think that love stems from doing so well out there as a junior.
Can I ask what the relation to Rue Fox is? I love how you just dropped kind of related.
Kind of related, yeah. So my granny is married to her uncle.
Okay. Complicated family tree, but okay, fair enough. So from sort of deciding that actually, you were going to focus your attentions on the yard, talk me through setting up your yard at home, because obviously you did have the sort of the family base, so to speak, which is a really big thing in itself. But I'm sure, actually a dairy farm, that there was a certain development that needed to be made and has been made over the years in terms of developing your base there. So what were the challenges you found in kind of setting up your yard and your string, and actually kind of going from the I'm riding and, I'm very competitive, but it's not my career, to actually being able to run a business? Because I know that's something that you've worked really hard at over the last few years. Yeah,
I mean, I think as a junior and young rider, my parents were very supportive, and I didn't have the biggest of sort of strings of horses. We had quite a few sort of DIY liveries to start with. We've got 22 stables at home, or we have now anyway. And so we probably had about sort of 12 or 15 when I first started eventing, and most of them had sort of DIY liveries in, with a couple of sort of a horse for mum and a couple of sort of ponies, and then obviously sort of horses as I sort of moved up the levels. And yeah, so the string sort of was fairly small, and mum and dad, and sort of like my first sort of real set of owners, Ian and Jane James, were sort of like the main group of people that sort of supported me really early on. And I probably only had sort of 4 or 5 horses sort of when I started going full-time eventing. And then slowly, I think as I sort of got to the end of Young Riders, the DIYs sort of and the liveries that we had sort of made way for more and more event horses, which was lovely and great. And it just kept expanding, really. I've added a few more stables here and there, and we actually live on an old dairy farm anyway. So there's no sort of beautiful purpose-built yard or anything like that. There's sort of stables in one bit and another sort of 4 somewhere else. And there's a few, sort of what I thought would be temporary stables, but they've been there for sort of probably 10 years now. And so it wouldn't be the easiest of yards to work out of. There's quite a bit of sort of walking around. But yeah, sort of I think as we've had successes, and as I've sold a few horses, we've managed to, I've managed to put a roof over the horse walker, and we've managed to build a nice lunch patch, and I've managed to sort of extend the school from sort of a 20 by sort of 50 to a nice sort of wide sort of 30 by 60 now. And it's developed, and it's been taking time. And I'd love to win the lottery. I do the lottery every week to see if I can win my millions. But I still haven't managed it yet. And it's been great actually. And my wife, sort of has her horses here now as well. I have Charlotte, so it really has. We've sort of taken over slightly, and for a little while, Mum still had a couple of liveries in one section of the yard, but they've all sort of gone now, and sort of event horses, and then my wife Charlotte's got sort of 3 or 4 show jumpers as well. So no, it's nice and busy.
And she's doing very well producing some of the young horses as well, isn't she? Can we
Yes.
pull her over to the dark side of eventing, do you think?
No, so she used to event, but she hasn't quite. She doesn't enjoy jumping or galloping at a solid wooden obstacle. So the cross country side of eventing doesn't really do it for Charlotte. She's quite happy. She likes to look pretty for the dressage, and she likes her show jumping. But yeah, no, she competed up to intermediate.
She probably sounds very sensible, to be fair.
She is far more sensible, yeah.
And I'm sure she canters down to some show jumps that are far, far bigger than any of us eventers want to look at. Can I ask you about the kind of the running of your yard now and your kind of competition schedule? Because one thing I find fascinating, and you are not one to shy away from competing abroad, and I think that's probably part of the reason that, to a degree, some of your results have sort of flown under the radar, so to speak, if that is fair to say, because actually you do head over into Europe and compete quite a lot, on the continent and go to a few different venues and that kind of thing. Just talk me through the kind of the thought process and what it is about that you really love.
So each horse each year has a mid-season aim and an end-of-season aim. And then we try to sort of fill in the best way that those horses can get to those competitions, or the best way we can get them to those competitions, really. And for each individual horse, so we try and tailor it as much as possible, or the horses' programs as much as possible to themselves. So some run a lot more than others, and I think I love going abroad. I love. We've got some fantastic sponsors in Holland, which is, we go to Holland quite a bit because of that. And I don't know, it's lovely to sort of see different courses, different tracks, and, a lot of English events, it sounds really bad, they're very similar, and they're beautifully built courses, and we're very lucky to be able to go and compete at places like Blenheim and Bramham, but I always love going to somewhere slightly different, and you get a bit of you get different questions, you get different types of fences, different styles of fences, and I think it just gives the horses a real sort of all-round experience. And when you're sort of bringing them through, sometimes you do have to go somewhere and it's not quite as perfect as they are in England, and it's just a bit of a different experience really for the horses. And they've got, I like competing on the surfaces, and a lot of competition venues in Europe now have good decent surfaces to dressage and show jump on, and and nowadays they look after the ground really well in Europe. And I think in the past it probably was something that a lot of people shied away from, because I think in Europe they didn't make quite such an effort, whereas they have such sort of, a lot of these competitions now have such big volumes and big entries that they have to keep up with all the other competitions and look after the ground and the going. And and we've made some fantastic friends as well, I think, and that's sort of one of the joys of it, is that I've got some great friends obviously in England, but it's nice to go and see some different faces in Europe as well.
And do your owners love it as well? Kind of the extra travel and kind of seeing different places and doing different things?
Yeah, so it's something that we end up having to sort of support a few of them with, and whether like we're going to Marsbergen and my mum's actually driving a couple of owners out in the car to come and watch the horses, and it's something that I'm very lucky to be able to do, and lucky that yes, a lot of the owners are very happy to go and compete abroad, but we just end up you end up having to provide a little bit of assistance, whether it's booking ferries or trains to get across the water, or booking hotels and organising that sort of thing. But I sort of, it's part of the sort of the routine now, and it's not really too much sort of extra hassle added into it for the enjoyment of going abroad.
I was going to say, actually, it's one of those things, isn't it, that I guess you go and you have that kind of experience with your owners at an event, but actually you pick that up and you go to different places and you do different things, only adds to the excitement and the kind of the enjoyment of the whole thing as well. what about the last couple of years? Because obviously that has not been straightforward by any stretch of the imagination, both through COVID and Brexit and that kind of thing. First of all, I guess, how have you, and this is, I'm dying to talk about ice cream. Listeners, I'm a big fan of a Laycock Dairy ice cream. But no, being serious, how has the last couple of years affected your business and sort of the way you have changed things or tweaked things or work to make them work for you now?
To be honest, it sounds really bad, and I know a lot of people didn't have a good time in COVID. I was very lucky. Nearly all my owners stayed with me and were very, very supportive. So the actual sort of COVID side of it, yes, we went to Haradu-Pa for the Nations Cup and stood too close to a Frenchman on a podium, and we got sort of a lot of stick because of that. And I missed out on competing up at Bergam, I think in 2020 because of that, because of all the social distancing rules and this, that, and the other. And so we made some mistakes, sort of like slightly unknowingly, but. Yeah, in general, I suppose the little bit of extra forms and things, and we did actually. I did Renswold, and I wanted to go to Lamoulen last year with a couple of horses for the 5-star. So I ended up staying actually in Holland for sort of 3 weeks nearly to make sure to get round all the sort of the social distancing and all the quarantine rules and things like that. And so we did sort of a few things that the only way at the time to be able to compete at Lamoulen was to do that, and so we just we went and did it. I had the horsepower, and there weren't any other real 5-stars looking like they were going to run. So the owners were great and very supportive and said, go for it. When the horses are fit and sound, you do sometimes just sort of have to take those situations and and try your best really. So from the COVID side of it, so we had a few interesting trips. Brexit's been the biggest challenge. A lot of the trips abroad, I used to just be able to organise myself fairly easily and book fairly easily. But we now use a logistics company, Equine Logistics, and Lydia, who runs Equine Logistics, is fantastic. And I ring her up now and I just say where I want to go and which horses are going, and she then gives me she sorts all the paperwork, and it is now a mountain of paperwork and barcodes and bookings and vet bookings, and so without that sort of extra support on the logistics side, I think I would definitely struggle to do it all myself. So Brexit has been almost for us the biggest problem, and the extra expense on the owners. But all the others have, and they like going abroad, and then again they've made a lot of friends, so they're quite happy for the horses to keep going.
And I'll go back to kind of the diversification through lockdown, because I went to stay with Spike earlier on this year. And Spike has been your vet for it, and I know he's a good friend of yours for years. And I'm sat there at the dinner table, listeners, and Spike says, we've had dinner, and he's quite the cook. Anybody that listens to this show will know that Spike loves to cook. And he says, would you like some of David Doel's ice cream for pudding? And I'm like, sorry, what now? And that was the first I'd heard of Laycock Dairy, which was the kind of the enterprise that, am I right in saying, was set up at the dairy farm just before lockdown? Or was it the growth was a result of lockdown?
My dad set it up with two other friends, probably about 6 years ago now, and
okay.
The ice cream just ticked along quite nicely, quite happily. And then when COVID came along, one of his friends actually couldn't see it sort of continuing, so wanted out. And I thought, why not sort of go and have a bit of a project? And so I took over his sort of site share of the business, and we turned it around, and a lot of the business was going through a wholesaler at the time, or nearly all the product was going through a wholesaler, and so we ended up changing sort of the business model, and we're selling a lot now from the farm door itself. We have some ice cream vending machines as well. And so, yeah, and that just sort of like it completely sort of changed the business, really. The majority of the milk from the farm, we've got about 300 dairy cows. The majority of the milk actually just goes to Cadbury's for chocolate. And
Excellent use of milk.
Excellent use of milk, absolutely. Yeah. So, and of those 300 cows, I think we figured out that there's probably about 3 cows worth actually of milk comes to the ice cream in the end. And so it's not a huge proportion. And I mean, I would need to be doing it full time if we were to sort of to scale up any more really than we are now. But no, it's really nice. It's sort of something. I spend quite a bit of time with my dad anyway, and he's a fantastic sporter and comes to a lot of events and watches. But it's nice to do something with my dad, having done a lot of things with my mum as well. And it's nice to have a bit of a change of scene really, and talk about something other than horses sometimes. And so I do a lot of sort of like the invoicing. Jane Lear, our other business partner, is amazing at sort of doing the flavorings and it's like the ingredient side of it, and my dad he does a lot of the making and the logistics side, so it works quite well. It seems to have quite a good team going.
And does it give you a different sort of thrill, sort of the different kind of business, to obviously a very different setup to eventing, but in its own right, does it give you the buzz as well?
So I absolutely, I hate selling horses, but I love selling somebody ice cream. And if I can upsell, so if they come in for a little 120 ml pot and they go away with a 500 ml or a 2 litre tub, it sounds really sad, but yeah, I get the buzz from that. So I love selling things in that sort of respect. And I used to go and do a bit of work on the bridal stand at Badminton, and I used to just love going onto the stand and standing there selling bridles to people. So I love selling people ice cream as well. So it is good fun, and it's actually quite a buzz when when you sort of go and approach somebody and to try and get new accounts and to get new stock lists. It's definitely a different type of buzz.
Well, I have to say, so we on cross country day at Badminton, I mean, Team Doel listeners were pretty busy. There, a lot going on. But your dad, bless his heart, basically, I would like to say broke his way into the media centre with a whole box full of ice cream. And he sort of comes along and he has this box. When there was kind of a topic of conversation, we might send you an ice cream. And I was like, laughing about it, thought, that would be great, just what we need. Next thing I know, lovely, your dad's Toby, isn't it?
Tony,
there we go.
Yeah.
Comes in with a box of ice cream and literally makes the day of everybody that was in the media centre. It was just brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And listeners, I can thoroughly recommend it. So there we go, ice cream plug done. But it's nice, isn't it? It's interesting to see the diversification and kind of the ways in which businesses work, and the way actually things have evolved over the last few years and have adapted, and the way actually our lives have changed. Because actually, somebody going for a walk locally to buy a tub of ice cream at one point wouldn't have felt like a big deal, but actually became a real focal point of somebody's day and their week. That's what sort of it revolutionized, or revived our business, I suppose. That's probably a better way of putting it. Sort of like the hour walk that everyone was allowed to go out and do. We're about sort of a 30-minute walk on a nice sort of circle, basically from Laycock and from another sort of Chippenham fairly local town, and we just had sort of queues and queues of people sort of coming up the yard driveway to come and buy ice cream, and it saved the business basically, and it got the word out. Got the word out really well. But it was actually nice because it gave people sort of something to actually go out and do, and a bit of something a bit different. And now, David, we spend 10 minutes on an interview talking about ice cream rather than your very impressive eventing career. Let's go back to the eventing. Go back to kind of the 5-star dreams. What is it that makes you tick? Is it the 5 stars? Is it the championships? Is it the teams? What is it that really makes you get up out of bed in the morning and kind of keep going?
It's the championships. It's trying. Look at the British team at the moment, and I mean the horsepower that is amazing. So it's definitely a tough one to crack into. But yeah, no, the 5 stars are. I have different horses in my string, and I realise that not every single one of them is a championship horse, but I have 1 or 2 of them that are amazing 5-star and very competitive 5-star horses. But they're probably not going to be an Olympics horse or a Europeans or a World Games horse. So that sort of it's quite nice in a way. But the 5 stars are definitely there to get me to a championships, and it was great to be recognised. Having had our badminton results with Galileo and Neumode, it was great to be on sort of like the reserve list or long list for the upcoming World Games this year.
What about the kind of 5-star journey in itself? Because badminton was a huge success point for you this year, and actually, best results at top level for you. And Galileo Neumode, who, listeners, I have discovered I have been saying his name incorrectly for the past however many years, so apologies to all connections there. But kind of in the build up to badminton, it wasn't all plain sailing. And I think it's important to touch upon this because it was something that certainly I think was very, very noted coming into this season and when it went so well at badminton. But Bicton 5-star last year, both the horses that went there kind of didn't have the fitness that I think perhaps you and the whole team would hold your hands up and say you had. Firstly, I would say that's one of the only times on a live stream I think I've ever really had a tear in my eye was watching you wash off. I think it was Galileo.
Yeah.
And there was absolutely no way, and I think it's an important point because I'm sure a lot of people at the time noticed. There's a lot of times where things don't go to plan on the cross country, and to see a rider when it doesn't go to plan immediately take control of the situation and do everything. Very obviously, they were until yes, the vets came on scene and everything else, but there was only one person everybody was looking to for direction as to what was happening. And that was you. And that, for me, that was proper horsemanship and something I think that a lot of people noted at the time. But you kind of went away from Bicton, regrouped, and actually he then went clear inside the time at Poe and came out at Badminton this spring on a tough track and was 3 seconds over the time. Just talk to me a little bit about that, because that's a really interesting journey. And I think comes back to that sort of horsemanship term.
Yeah, I love riding anyway. So it's sort of like, the horse, I could just spend hours just sort of like playing with the ponies and playing with the horses. And yeah, it was a bit of a. I've always been sort of slightly proud of the fact that I always thought would normally get our horses or my horses sort of very fit and for their competitions. And I'm really lucky at home. We've got really good hills. We live at the bottom of the hill, basically. A lot of our farm is on the edge of, is on the side of a hill. So, a lot of my canter work is done on the farm, on the grass, up and down our hills. And I think for Bicton, I made the mistake of just sort of going up and down the hills because everyone said, "Oh, Bicton's going to be hilly. It's going to be hilly." So. I went up and down our hills even more, sort of thing. But I slightly then neglected a little bit more of sort of like the long canters, and so the horses did lots of sort of short, sharp sprints of sort of. It takes about a minute to just over a minute to canter up our hill, and I think that was really sort of like the mistake that I made was that I increased the number of times they were going up and down the hill, which I thought was the right thing to do, but. It was adding, and probably for a short format that would have been absolutely fine. But those hills at Bicton and galloping for 11 minutes, I think, and I went to be competitive there as well. I wasn't going for 30 seconds or a minute over time or anything like that. So they were travelling and they were really galloping, and I got to 9 minutes, and both horses just they jumped into the water and just completely ran out of puff basically. And at the time, I'd realised had obviously made a mistake in their canter work, and it was absolutely gutting because you think you've done the right thing, and I really hadn't, and especially sort of with everyone watching, and it's always very sort of public when you're out there on the cross country course, and you've got sort of everyone watching, and it's all being live streamed, and yeah, I mean, it is, you feel like a real idiot when you're there, sort of, you know, your first horse where you can sort of say, well, you know, that was sort of, you know, one horse possibly wasn't fit enough, but when the same thing happens to the second horse, it is definitely, yeah, it sort of was a bit sort of gut-wrenching. But no, I've got a fantastic team. I do a lot of work with Nick Turner, and you know, we went back to the drawing board. We discussed how I got the horses fit, and you know, Spike also was a big part of this, and went back to sort of the drawing board and redid their fitness programs a little bit, and yeah, I think sort of Galileo especially, he wouldn't be the most sort of blood types. He's quite sort of fairly foreign, and we tailored the galloping program a little bit more, and it worked. Well, it worked. It was a success. So and that was a bit of a relief, really. And I know, you know, sort of Poe is flat, and it was great to gallop round Poe sort of so soon after Bixen, because at least I didn't have all winter to sort of mull over it, and you know, sort of the proof was in the pudding that just by changing the bit of galloping, and for galloping him for longer as well, which is what we in essence sort of have done more of. That was great, and then to come out and know that worked so well for Poe, to be able to then come and recreate it for badminton was ideal.
I think, you know, when it did brilliantly pay off for at Poe, but also badminton felt like it was kind of the real moment that everything came together. Just talk us through the week, because actually, you know, it started off very, very well, but did it feel any different to any of the other 5-stars you'd been to? And it was your first badminton as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, I entered in 2020 on Shallandale Quest, and obviously it didn't run then. And is it any different? It's completely different, because it is what it is, and I really try to not let myself get too excited till I actually put Galileo on the lorry on Tuesday morning and drove all of sort of 20 minutes or 25 minutes down, sort of down the road. And yeah, it's just a bit surreal. And you know, normally you're turning up to a great big grassy field with a few temporary stables in, and you know, when you're driving into that lovely sort of beautiful park, and there's lots of sort of different processes. Even when you get to badminton, you have to unload the horses at the village hall, and you do a lot of checks there, and then you have to drive on again to the actual stable. And you know, sort of like there's a real sort of process even of getting the horse to badminton, and so it's very sort of unique in that respect. And I think I've been quite lucky. We've had a few Australians, Wendy Schaefer mainly, sort of based with us over the years, and Wendy's been to badminton a couple of times, so I sort of had an idea, you know, of what was sort of behind the scenes a little bit, and what to expect. And you know, sort of obviously being so close to badminton, I've been to badminton for the last sort of 20 years probably, and been and watched. And so yeah, no, it was. I got excited on Tuesday when I finally got there, and again, you know, I had fantastic sort of help and support. So not just sort of Nick Kerner to go and walk the course with and things, but Adam Kemp, who I do my dressage training with. He only lives sort of in Gloucester, so you know, he came down and he was great. He'd written the whole week off to come and help me, and the plan that we sort of set, we all sat down. We sat down at Christmas time all together and made a plan of how to get, you know, sort of Galileo to badminton in the best sort of shape and form. And you know, the plan, it's not very often a plan works, but sort of the plan pretty much came off, and that was lovely.
You say pretty much came off. I mean, it's very difficult to go to badminton and to be pretty close to finishing on your dressage score. He was just 3 seconds over the time cross country, and that was all you added all weekend. Talk us through the satisfaction of the cross country and kind of feeling like that plan had come together, but also knowing that you had just absolutely conquered your first badminton track.
Yeah, so he's mega. I love riding Galileo. He's really cool, especially sort of cross country wise. And it's funny, I was never sort of that concerned with the cross country course. He's a really lovely, really agile, scopy horse. And, so even from my first walk, obviously there's always, the narrow fences that you've got to make sure your lines are right and things like that. But, sort of always have the faith and the belief that, he was going there well prepared and, pretty on it. So as long as I didn't stuff up on my lines, he should have had a nice trip round, and he did, and he just he skipped round, and I was a little bit cross with myself for the 1.2 time faults, because I did just let him have a little bit of a breather, about 7th, 8th minute after he jumped through the solar panels, and I probably could have kicked on that little bit more and not had the time faults, but luckily that they didn't cost him in the end. But I think the nicest thing for me was his jumping on the last day. He's a little bit anemic as a horse, and Spike's been great with helping to keep sort of like his red blood cells and his iron up enough, and he came out absolutely bouncing, and I can't thank Spike enough for getting him there looking great, and then keeping him sort of feeling so great throughout the week. So I was so chuffed with that, and how he came out, and then how he jumped on the last day. He was just absolutely pinging.
And there was that kind of moment, I guess, where you came out, and I think you just inside the top 10 or just outside the top 10 overnight going into the show.
Yeah, well, I was 11th, and I was really lucky. I think because Ollie Townend, he had 2 horses, so he actually jumped one. He jumped one just before me, and then obviously one afterwards, and and that meant it was lovely. It meant I ended up being on TV, and all my sort of family and friends that weren't there at badminton, it was great, because I wasn't supposed to be on TV, and I was, because Ollie was sort of jumping out of order, and it was great. So many people managed to watch him jump, and he jumped such a nice round that it was great.
And it was a tough show jumping track as well, and it meant that you climbed up the leaderboard. You ended up finishing in 6th place. What next? He's obviously been, I think, long listed for Protoni, but you've got a number of other horses at 5-star level as well, including Ferro Point, who had an absolutely heartbreaking time at the end of the show jumping in Le Moulin. I mean, my heart went out to you for that, because a fall at the final fence in the show jumping, when you're about to finish on your dressage score, is brutal. But you've got a brilliant team of horses. What is the plan for the next few months?
So Galileo, he's going to go do the 4-star in Marsbergen this week, and then go to the 4-star in Harad Dupin, and then go to Burley, which should be very exciting for him. And so that will be sort of his main aim. Ferro Point, I think, will probably go down to Pau in October. And then we've got a lovely group of sort of slightly younger horses, quite a few of them at 3-star. And so it's just sort of getting the miles and the experience on them, really. You're looking for sort of them to be stepping up to 4-star next year.
Exciting. I've got one horse that I want to ask you about, but you might actually mention this horse when I ask you, have you got one for our listeners to watch? Sort of a future star, if you like. Doesn't have to be one that we'll have heard of, but one that you think a lot of for the future.
We've got a really lovely 7-year-old called Kenzo Power B, who Gillian Jonas, who owns Galileo, also owns Kenzo, and I think he will definitely be one to watch. He's had a great year so far. and I think sort of like he'll be there or thereabouts, I think, in the future.
That was the one that I was angling at. So I'm glad you hit that nail on the head. Look, David, it has been an absolute pleasure to dig a little bit more into your career and kind of look forward to what might be coming up, but also understand a little bit about what makes you tick. And you've mentioned one word a few times throughout the show, and I think our listeners will have picked up on this as well. Lucky. It is not luck. It is downright hard work, talent, a lot of blood, sweat and tears that go into it. But you are truly one of the nicest men on the eventing circuit. So, David, thank you and good luck.
No, it's been lovely to have a chat.
And listeners, I hope you have enjoyed an insight into David and his career, and lots to look forward to for the future. We will look forward to Galileo at Burley, but lots more as well. We have no doubt that championship team is calling at some point, and we hope you've enjoyed the show. If you ever get the chance to try any Laycock Dairy ice cream, then mark my words, you should not pass it up. Listeners, thank you as always for tuning in, and a big thank you to Bedmax for their support of the When Nicole Met series. We have got lots more shows coming your way, so do stay tuned. But David, thank you. I'm going to let you go to bed because you've got to be up in about 2 hours time.
Yeah. No, it's good. It's good. We're looking forward to our trip away.
Well, look, go enjoy it. And listeners, thank you very much. We'll be back soon with more on the Echo Ratings Eventing podcast. Thank you for listening to the Echo Ratings Eventing podcast.
Have a wonderful day, everybody. And I look forward to having you back with us soon.
Don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Instagram for more.
Listeners, we'll speak to you again soon.